You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Chris.
You can blink your eyes, make faces.
That's pretty cool. So this guy can see his own. He's wearing an Oculus Rift, but he can't actually. But everybody else is seeing that he's wearing. It looks like his own face.
Correct.
And they're doing this with just like a webcam. Tricky, tricky. Yeah, so this I think was happening at Siggraph.
Correct. And there he is taking it off. That was kind of funny. Okay.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Chris. So here's the article, the research blog, headset removal
Okay.
for virtual and mixed reality. So essentially, not only here's the green screen, here they're playing around with it, but more importantly is that it looks like, I don't know, something out of Aliens, or what was the one that the guy from Titanic did that was underneath the water? I can't think of the name of it. Remember that one where they found aliens deep underwater?
Ooh, I don't remember what it's called, but that sounds like a good movie.
Oh, you haven't? Yeah. Well, they had kind of like.
Was it like The Orb or something like that? I don't know. Was it James Cameron?
James Cameron did one. Gosh.
It wasn't called The Sphere or something like that.
No, that was based on a Crichton novel. Now, this was, what was it? Abyss.
Abyss. I do remember Abyss for sure.
So, but they had like headset, but it's funny, all these where you illuminate the inside of the mask so that you can see it. And that's what this kind of reminds me of.
Yeah.
And
cool
but
setup.
the important thing, and it kind of is like a segue into our topic today.
What's our topic today?
Well, virtually mindful. How VR is being used, or at least hoped to be used, to provide a more mindful state. Chris is being mindful right now. So we'll get into that in a moment, but getting back to this. So essentially what this does is it creates a dynamic face model capture, which is being done by this device here. Now it appears to be, there's some animation, but I'm thinking that this is a fixed capture.
Okay.
Laid. So I don't know if, there it shows the, I think some eye tracking. With her eye on the right, she shows a dynamic of the reconstructed face. By moving or clicking the mouse, you're able to simulate both apparent eye gaze and blinking, which is very important. Otherwise, you have this dead stare. So essentially, they capture your face in 3D. And then, as you can see there, and then I guess they may have to recapture it depending on if you want blinking or not. So it's called the gaze database. Face model texture indexed by eye gaze, used dynamically to change the appearance of the face during synthesis and generating a desired eye gaze. Yeah, because this is why you'll be dead. You wouldn't be actually looking at the person. So this gives the illusion that this is your face underneath the mask, and allows the individual that you are communicating with, because that's one of the things we talked about Sansar last week. But imagine being able to go in a VR environment with a VR body, but still have a representation of your face that can interact with another person, so that you have eye contact as well as expression with your eyes, so that the person feels like they're actually communicating. So I thought that was kind of a cool idea. And, right now, as mentioned, this little video came from Siggraph. Here's another example. So you notice how our eyes are moving.
Yeah. Yeah, they instead of just using like a picture overlay, they're actually using that 30 or 60 second capture that they do. Correct. With their eyes moving around. It makes it look totally real. I mean, you can't tell that it's semi looks like some sort of composite thing. It almost looks like the VR headset itself is what's composited.
Overlaid,
not her,
correct.
Yeah, not her face in this thing. So yeah, it looks, her face actually looks more real than the Oculus
headset.
That's there, you know, headset. Crazy.
Yeah. And so here's another little video.
She's loving it.
Yeah. So obviously they're talking. So this link will be in the show notes if you want to look at it. But so here's she in the green screen.
Pretty cool.
She's actually,
but what does this have to do with mindfulness?
Well, one of the things that I have been exploring, as you know, my wife's a psychotherapist. What if you had the opportunity of putting somebody in an environment that's tranquil, like a forest scene? You know, here we're in Oregon, we have that around us, but not everybody has it. You know, city environments, you may not have, you know, even though we have some parks, some of them can't be like in Oregon. So this gives the person, and I'll just have this running in the background. In fact, it's interesting. That was a creative, what is that device? It's actually a real sense that they're using in order to capture that face. I think that's kind of funny. So obviously Google uses whatever technology is available. So that's what they're using. They've captured it. And then it allows her to look like she's actually looking around, as you can see here. And, you know, we've seen a couple of demos now. But the whole point is, imagine one of the things that have kind of taken off in psychotherapy is teleconferencing or teletherapy, where essentially you use a webcam and you interact with your therapist through a webcam. It's something that my wife is getting more and more involved in. I actually set her up a little mini studio with some lights so that she looks really nice in her office. One of the things that she's really good at is providing a very comfortable office that's soothing. And that's hard to actually present in obviously a teleconferencing situation. So we're trying to create that illusion, at least on her end. But the flexibility, obviously, is that you don't have to physically run to another office. So let's take this another step. What if the two individuals were sitting in a virtual office, per se, and, you know, with their virtual component, or using a green screen setup, which is probably a little more difficult, but you could do, at least in your home, you could have a little VR setup like we were talking about Sansar, which I'll have an update of why my laptop didn't work in a moment. But with this kind of setup, you would be able to see their face, which obviously is very important in therapy and counseling, because that's what, you know, provides the emotion or the emotives that we, or a lot of the psychotherapists, work off of. And if you can't see a person's face, you don't really get the...
You're at a disadvantage.
Exactly. And in fact, she'll make the point that if a person isn't actually in the office, because body language plays a big part in it. And like you and I are talking, and you can see part of my hand movements now, but you can't see the rest of my body. So having more gestures available, as well as your face, are very important. The cues, you know, does a person cross their legs? You know, how are they closed up? All that plays a part in psychotherapy. And that's why in-office visits are so important. So if we can replicate this and provide an environment that seems conducive and safe for an individual, I see it happening. And that's, you know, the lead into, can virtual reality help in mindfulness? And we're going to go through a few website articles and the definition in a little bit. But I thought this was an interesting way to take off with our opening video. And let's kind of move, if you don't mind, directly into that theme. You ready?
Sure, yeah, let's check it out.
Okay, so let's see what I've got here. Let's look at what Google identifies as mindfulness. Let's look at definition number 2, a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations, used as therapeutic technique. And Chris's, you can't see him, but I'm going to go ahead and change the camera to him. Go ahead, Chris.
We're focusing on the present moment. We're here podcasting, honoring each other in this moment. Namaste, Mike.
So, one of the important things in psychotherapy, and my wife is very good at it, is soothing an individual by, soft talking, being non-threatening, and allowing the person to kind of explore their feelings. And that's the important thing, is trying to not only converse in a manner of what your feelings are about, but also to just understand your feelings. And a lot of people haven't even gotten to that point. And again, where can be our help in this? Essentially, what caught my attention on this, and I sent it to my wife, Siobhan, and she kind of dismissed it. VR's answers to relaxation, meditation experiences. Here is called kindness meditation, but a lot of them are using 360 video to approach that.
That's
And
pretty cool.
I think there's a lot of strengths in that. As you know, I created a 360 video of the creek, and actually, if you go out to our website, which is owlcreektherapy.com, and go to the bottom website link, it says, what does it say? Relax, and it actually is a full 360 of the creek, like you're at the creek, with ambisonic sound. So if you actually are using that in your headset, it's like you're there. And so the whole approach here is to provide a very relaxing and stimulating environment that will help you bring you into that state.
How's the picture quality on this? On like
which?
this kindness meditation? What is it? I wonder what equipment they're using and how good the picture quality is. I've been watching some 360 YouTube videos and that have been recorded. I watched one this morning that was from, it's like some expo going on in California right now, and it's like a vintage pinball / arcade expo of some sort. It's called the California Experience, something like that. And they had recorded a walkthrough. It was like 45 minutes long. I didn't watch the whole thing, but the quality just doesn't seem like it's quite there. Like you can't get 4K with like a really good looking picture. So far what I've seen, it's like, it seems like.
That's very true. And the reason for that is, got to remember, 360 is actually 4 quadrants. So if you divide 4K into the 4 quadrants, because essentially
you're only getting 1080.
About 90, 110 is about what you can see in your headset. Let me jump back to my picture. So that's about 1080.
It seems like way less than that. The picture I see on a lot of these, it just seems like
and there's
not a very good picture compared to what I'm seeing now, for most content. So there's a little bit of catch up, I think, that needs to go on.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit. First of all, what are you viewing this on?
My computer.
Okay. So one of the things that I suggest to people, and I use a program called 4K Downloader, download your YouTube videos. Don't try to play them from your computer, because one of the things is, make sure that, and we'll use this one as an example behind me. One, this is actually in 3D. So that means when you put it on your headset, you can actually view it. And if you've got your anaglyph glasses, which I do, I'll go ahead and put them on. This gentleman will appear like he's there in front of you. So this is an important, I think, aspect of doing 360 video, is having the immersive quality. And you got your glasses there, Chris?
I was trying to find them.
But this gives depth and makes you feel like you're actually in that environment.
Right.
Plus, then if you add the 360 component, look and see.
Amazing. Yeah, so cool. I mean, I definitely think that this is like where it's all going to go, and I can't wait. But for me, the immersion.
Well, hang on, let me finish.
Oh yeah, go ahead. So,
the most important thing is, make sure that your setting here is at the highest possible that your bandwidth.
I always do. Yeah. This one looks like the picture is really good.
Well, it's not only, notice that the upper setting here is 4320s 8K. Okay. Now that doesn't necessarily mean Like for instance, this one says 2160.
But that might be enough right there. I don't know. I haven't experienced this one, so I'm going to check this one out right now. And this is on. This is the Verge one, right?
No, this is a link that's on there. It's called Kindness Meditation. So I'm not going to click on it, but if I download this using like the program that I just mentioned, 4K downloader, I would be able, I'm going to actually pause it because we're probably affecting my bandwidth, but I would be able to see this in the highest quality. And what I have found is that you could even download this to applications like in Daydream, what's the program called that I use, Skybox, and you get excellent quality. Now, obviously, you would get excellent quality on your Oculus, but download them. Don't try and stream them, and that will actually improve the quality of it. The fact that this was done with a high-quality camera system speaks.
How did they capture this?
What type of camera?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm assuming it could be an Ozo. They could have rented it. An Ozo is probably even though they're very expensive, it's probably the best quality stereo.
Yeah, the quality on here, the quality. I have it running in my background, and the quality is like way. And obviously, the lighting and the venue has a lot to do with it. If you're just going into a regular commercial building with flat lighting, fluorescent lighting, this building is filled with natural, beautiful, lots of light. But even then, I guess
if you're running it right now, Chris, don't run it. Pause it because it affects your picture.
Right. Okay.
So let's actually, because it's 360, we can look at the lighting. So there is a little.
It is so amazing.
Yeah, look at all the open lighting back here.
Yeah, so that would be a lot more, I think, immersive. I think that's. Well, I think that's a lot. I think that's like a lot better. And so you said you think it's on an Ozo.
I mean. Let's see, maybe it will tell us what they used. Let's bring it out to YouTube.
And an Ozo is made by Nokia?
Correct.
Yeah.
Now there's another camera, we've talked about it. Gosh.
And they're what, $4,500 or something for the Ozo?
Which one, the Ozo?
Yeah.
How about 45,000?
45,000.
So there's another camera that I have been looking at personally that also does stereo. That's only 3,500. Now you can also do. There's some other setups, but they're all normally very expensive. Here we've got 2 dislikes for whatever reason. So it doesn't actually say the camera that's used, but I could probably contact them and find out. So I have a feeling it's an Ozo. There is a camera. Yeah, it's expensive. It may have actually dropped down to maybe 35,000 now. I can't remember the exact price. Very expensive, but if you're, for instance, I don't think that these people are videophiles, so they probably hired a crew to come in.
Oh yeah. And did the video yeah, exactly. Yeah, but if you're gonna, I mean, you could make that $40,000 nut back pretty quick, probably.
Now the other thing,
if you had gigs lined up and content to create that you were gonna. So I wonder if Lens Baby rents these things.
I don't know. You can look at it. I don't think so. There is a couple of, I think you can rent them if you're in the LA area. I think even up in San Francisco. Okay, one other point before we move on to the next topic, but on this, the other thing to keep in mind.
Okay.
Oh, geez, if I were, I've already forgotten what I was going to say. Now is Google has this new process coming out, and they don't really have more information on it. I've actually kind of dissembled the output. It's called VR 180. And so instead of using a full 360 as you see here, because who's going to be looking behind when you're doing this? I mean, you're going to be looking up front. And so if you've got the full 180 right here, you can see in the peripheral, you can move your head a little bit. But the cool thing is it's 1/4 of the bandwidth. So what you experience here with an 8K, you would be able to get with this VR 180 format. And I'm actually looking at your picture instead of back there. So you could actually support this in 180 with the same kind of quality and stereo. And the way that they do this is that they take this equirectangular, chop off the back end of it, the sides, and then they kind of lay them 90 degrees opposing to each other in the same frame. So what it does is it prevents, normally with stereo, you have to do over and under. So that's literally 2 4K images on top of each other.
Okay.
And then, okay, so it's like just twice the bandwidth just because you have 2. But if you chop off the bottoms of each, then you can put them next to each other. And as long as the meta tag identifies this, then your decoder is able to process it. The other cool factor with VR180 is it looks normal in your browser because they can crop it. Now, the thing that I wish they would have held on to is, you notice how this is identified as 3D, and I can use anaglyph glasses with it. With this new VR180, even though it's stereo when you look at it in a viewer, it's not in stereo when you look at it on a browser. So I strongly recommend it to them. Put this 3D feature back in, because if you've got anaglyph, it's still kind of cool to look at it. I mean, this has a lot of depth to it. So this is what I'm going to download, and then I'll report back next week on how well it looks. So I think that's kind of cool.
Part of it, though, is, Mike, you got to be able to deliver this through the web browser. Nowadays, 95% of your tasks that you're doing, this is like the idea behind the whole Chrome OS, right? It's like everything we're doing is in the browser now. You're on the internet. You're not doing anything where you're not on the internet ever on your computer anymore. So, whether it's my CAD, now I'm in Onshape, doing it in the cloud, you got to be able to deliver a high quality, high resolution 3D, or stereoscopic VR experience without having to do the Mike Balzer workarounds where you have to download it from the internet. And, you're definitely part of like a 0.01% of people that are willing to go through that extra task and do that. This needs to be fully streamable. You know what I mean?
Well, it is. Okay, but here's the other point to keep in mind. Most people don't have an Oculus. They have maybe cardboard. So
Sure.
You have to have high quality through a mobile device, which is not possible, right? In fact, the maximum you can get right now.
How many months away are we? Only a few, huh? Probably.
Well, the VR180 format should be available by the end of the year, and there should be some vendors actually creating these VR180 cameras. I don't think personally they're going to be very good. They're going to be like smartphone type cameras. I've been looking at, as you know, trying to create a higher quality micro four thirds, but just because of the format, you need fisheye lenses, and they're very difficult to come by at a low cost. They're normally like thousands of dollars. Then you have to buy 2 of them. So I kind of abandoned that. I'm looking for a square 1-inch sensor, because I think that would be the trick. Because they've got some nice $200-300 fisheye lenses. The problem is when you hook them up to a micro four thirds at 4K video, since they crop the sensor itself, you lose that fisheye capability. So that's I'm looking forward to that, and that will provide the quality you need from a VR perspective. So let's get back to this article. So they go through there and they talk about, a few items. You can go back and look at it and how they're using 360 video. And then if we go into this next 4 top ways virtual reality is contributing to health and wellness, and they talk about some of its experiences with it. For instance, and we've been looking at this, putting VR on bicycles. In fact, I have a developer kit hopefully coming in that I'll be able to give a report on soon from VizZoom, or is it VR Zoom? Can't remember. That allows you to attach it. It's a Bluetooth device to a pedal, and then it knows the number of rotations based upon, because it's got a 3 degrees of freedom IMU in it, so that it knows your rotations, and then it just sends it to your headset. So if you've got an applicable app that allows it to sense this rotational, gives you the experience like you're moving through an environment. So one of the goals that I was trying to do is mount a VR camera and go slowly through like a park or something on either a bicycle or on a small vehicle, to record and then bring it back in later. And just by increasing the frame rate, you can accelerate or decelerate. And because you're in 180, you can view the beautiful scene around you. So we'll see how that goes. But that's one of my ideas. Obviously, using the the Unity 3D engine would help to create some environments. In fact, I think that's what this company uses. But the whole point is this new device is only like $90, and you can attach it to any exercise bike that you have already. So that's one way that VR, and we've talked about that earlier in the year. Actually, I think at the end of 2016, remember my little skits of being on a bike. Okay, but also using VR for surgeon skills. So a lot of this we've already talked about. So there's nothing new from that perspective for about its wellness. But from a VR perspective, there's this company called Fluid Interfaces that has projects that are working on using virtual reality and mindfulness. And then there's this actual app, Guided Meditation VR. And then they have a download that you can download for the Vive, or the Oculus Rift, or Gear VR. And then let's see if we've got some actual media, what it looks like. The problem I have with a lot of this is that they still look somewhat cartoony. Even though they look nice. Here we go. Let's look at this little video here. So obviously, as I mentioned, here's your New York City hustle and bustle. And then the person's going into their office. So clearly they're trying to say all the impacts of modern society, but we can put on our HTC Vive.
Calm the mind.
And go into
Live only in the present. Stress is a creation.
But again, remember, this kind of looks, I mean, not that it's a problem. I mean, this is fairly good for Unity.
That's freaking cool, man.
Yeah. But some of the things that I'm exploring using the Unreal Engine, it looks like you are in
real life,
a forest.
Yeah.
But the problem is downsizing that.
It's an idea. It's a cool, and it's guided meditation, which guided meditation works really well. I do guided meditations pretty often. It's a really easy way to just kind of get into it and quickly get in the zone. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times where, man, I feel boxed in, even at my office. We live in Central California, Central Coast of California, where, I mean, it is like a tourist, world destination now. So, our little town used to be 20,000 people, but during the summer now, we'll get like 80,000 people jamming into our town to come to the fair and go to concerts. And it's cool, we have all that stuff. But all the places that we used to go and be able to do this in nature, you can't go there and be by yourself anymore. There's a lot of people. So, little ways to escape like this, that's cool.
No, and obviously, as you know, I have been pushing not only myself, but our show to look at the quality that can be obtained from some of these, I call them real-time visualization engines, but Unreal, the Unity engine, the Crytek engine. What was the one experiment? Cool. But there's what was the engine? Serious Sam is done with it. I can't think of the name of it, but we've had them on to talk about their engine. They have that puzzle game that I think would be pretty cool for this too, because some of the environments, and they're going to be bringing that out in VR. So obviously, just the quietness, not having murder simulators or first-person shooters, just be able to be in an environment that replicates an area that you may not be able to obtain in your normal life, or let's say at least quickly on your lunch hour, can now be attained to. And I think this is really cool. And obviously I've had my headsets on for some time, and I've seen a lot of things like this, and it, yeah, I do think it will make a difference.
Yeah, like virtual volunteering too, that, make you feel good. You put it on and you could virtually help somebody maybe that needs somebody to talk to. Okay, elderly people could go on there. You could meet them and hang out with them to
Well, and this is where all this stuff plays into the Google, where you can show your face.
That's cool.
The internet and the bandwidth that we have available to us that we can communicate. All right, well, let me finish up this one more article. These will all be in the show notes that I found. Is mindful of making us ill? This was kind of the negative of it. You know, the problem with a lot of this is that it becomes this catch-all term, and I think there's some positives, but this is a great little article on how all this might be influencing us in a more commercial manner that's actually getting away from it. And I thought that was kind of an interesting little article. So that's at the end of it. So finally, I'll segue into my 3D from the past update. Remember last week I tried to... let's see, get back to my screen. Remember last week I tried to get Sansar up and running on my laptop?
Yeah.
All I had was a black screen. Well, yeah. I was able to actually get it up and running this morning. Essentially, I uninstalled it and reinstalled it, and voila, it started working. One of the things I wanted to show off was the bathroom that I'm remodeling. So I brought this model in, and as I mentioned, it was kind of a pain because I had to do a few things different than what I had to do in both Unity and Unreal. It was much easier there, but I finally did it. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the bathroom. Now, if you're wondering, that's a mirrors that we have there, but for whatever reason, the shader, it doesn't have what they call reflection probes like you have in Unity and Unreal. So it doesn't capture your environment. So even though I made these metal and highly reflective, this was the outcome of that shader. So I'll have to explore why. Like I said, using another program, I was able to bake it in. In fact, I actually installed this light yesterday, so that light actually is there now. Kind of cool. But so here are the paintings that she's going to put in this. So we're talking about mindfulness. You can start in your bathroom. So essentially, this will be the tub that will be in here. This area here will be, to give us more space, was a closet, small closet, obviously. But I did all this and imported into Sansar. And the cool thing about it, I haven't created an experience yet. I'm still editing it. But you have a lot of tools. Now, they're very limited. You can't actually change the textures on these surfaces here, these objects. You can do it as you import them, but once they're in there, you can't make any modifications to it. So you will have to rely mainly on your modeler before you import. It imports FBX, so if you have any type of modeler that exports FBX, we kind of talked about it last week. I used Blender. They give a fairly good tutorial. I found some features didn't have to be enabled, but I would highly recommend moving forward with it. And also, in order to improve performance, make sure you bake your object and reduce the number of polygons. As you can see here, it seems to work pretty well. When I actually brought it into Sansar, it was still fairly heavy. Actually, I have two bathrooms. So I have this one. You can also bring in ambisonic sounds. So remember, we talked about how sound is important. So I brought in the creek sound because it's like running water in the bathroom. So this is an earlier version of it. As you can see, it's not as nice as this one over here.
Okay.
See, lighting's a little differently, or a little different. So I have two bathrooms there, and then I can launch this. Let's see if I should do that. Let's see, save, we'll build it. Here we go. So I'm building the scene. I'm actually building it, and I'll be able to actually view this while being in Sansar. Now, the cool thing about Sansar, it is a person environment, just like, what was the other program they had? I can't think of it. But for VR. So it allows multiple people to experience, and they call these experiences, what you've created or what other people created, and people can walk around them. They can actually communicate with one another. Now, obviously, it doesn't have the Google face. In fact, it doesn't have anything that looks like your body. It's an avatar, but you can create some fairly realistic avatars. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know how long it will take for this to build. Oh, here we go. It's almost ready. It's uploading. Uploading.
Uploading. Uploading.
Okay, so let's go visit it.
Okay.
So
small bathroom by ResLab.
So this is actually up in the cloud, and
Okay.
if I actually, I could invite you if I made it. So here we go. And there's my character, or some character. I don't know who that is. It's not me. But now I can actually walk around. I don't know. And I can't remember the buttons now, but I can actually be third person or first person, but I can walk in. But this is kind of cool because I left one of the walls so that you can, it's somewhat transparent. Once you're in the room, it's not transparent, but you can actually look inside, so you can get a cue of how, I think she's a little small.
Yeah, she is.
So,
where the sink in the bathtub's huge.
Yeah, it's probably. So let's see. I think, yeah, this one's also fairly huge. So obviously the scale's off a little bit.
That's all right.
Well, but I mean,
maybe she's a little kid.
But I also noticed the toilet seat here, because everything else is what they call unlit, so all the lighting was baked into it.
Okay.
The toilet seat was not baked. I didn't add the unlit texture, so there's no lighting on it, so that's why it's dark. But notice again the shaders for the highly reflective mirrors showed up kind of wonky.
Huh.
But yeah, you could create a final experience and have people come in. So imagine having the experience here where somebody from somewhere else can review what you've done, and kind of you can talk about it because you still have headphone capability, so you can communicate with them. You can both look at it in first person. They could actually get in the bathtub, and if they've got an HTC Vive, they can actually sit on the floor and kind of get the experience, which you remember I did that in an earlier episode. But you know, it takes a little bit. All engines have their nuances. And this is exactly the same. But the fact is that I'm able to walk around and have other people walk around in my experience with very little work on my part. It's kind of cool. As mentioned, they use C#, so you can create action scripts. So you could like turn on the water if you wanted to. I haven't seen anybody do that, but as you can see, I think it's kind of cool. And so what I can do now is I can jump out of this and go back to, let's see, the Atlas. Is that it? Yeah, so I'm going to go to Sansar. So here are some of the things other people have created. Can you see that?
Yeah, there's like a nice library of cool.
So let's go to the Zen. So we were just talking about that. So here's the Zen Garden by Sansar themselves that I'm loading up.
Also a place that you could practice your mindfulness.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
So if you've got a VR headset already, you can go ahead and try this out. It's available for both the Oculus and the HTC Vive, and it's free. Now, what's funny, though, is that because other people can join you in here, you wouldn't have it all to yourself. So let it spin a little bit. So what do you have for technology in 3D today, Chris?
Oh, so awesome. And really, you know, I like to check in from time to time with, I go on to devil.lulzbot.com. They have this amazing directory. Obviously, big Lulzbot fan. I have 3 Lulzbot printers here that print all day long. They're amazing printers. But one thing, Lulzbot, one of the reasons that I really enjoy the company and I really respect the company is that they are, well, not only are they fully open source, but they have this development directory at devil.lulzbot.com. And we've come here quite a few times before, because this is like before it's news, you can kind of check this directory out. So a few days ago, I started doing some digging because I've got a Taz 4 that got upgraded to a TAS 5. I have the new TAS 6. I've got a Lulzbot Mini. So I like to keep tabs on what's going on here. So I start digging into the TAS directory and notice that some of these dates are kind of more recent. And I go down and I look that they have a quiver directory planned. It's not quite, there's not one up here, but it looks like TAS 7's coming. They have in their accessories has been updated within the last month. So I kind of go into here and I'm looking and I see that they're planning on something with an E3D extruder tool head. So, you know, I'm thinking to myself, so one thing that I've noticed with Lulzbot though is that they use their Lulzbot Mini as kind of the development platform. They've been rolling in the features into the Mini slightly sooner than they do the TAS platform. Maybe because it's smaller, so it's easier to prototype on, I don't know. But either way, I went into the Mini directory and I also found that they have the Hibiscus, which is the next revision of their next revision. And so I go into their accessory and I say, oh, there's the Finch, a Mini E3D. Again, this E3D thing pops up. So sure enough, I'm going into their production parts and they do everything. They do these assemblies. You can download these assemblies. They come in FreeCAD. So you actually, it's an open source because they're so open source. They only use open source software. You know, Cura, they only use, so the reason that they recommend Cura and Slicer is because they really want people doing this stuff on either Linux. It'll work on Windows or Mac, but they also want it to, no matter what, to be able to run on free operating systems, cheap hardware. You can run the Lulzbot machines just with a Raspberry Pi. You only need a Raspberry Pi, and with Raspberry Pi, you could literally download. You could model and download on a Raspberry Pi and print just with Raspberry Pi. So that's one thing I really. So I went in. I downloaded the free 3D, the FreeCAD files for some of these things, and then because I like working in Onshape, I imported them into Onshape. So I don't know if you can see this, Mike.
I can.
And so I'm looking at this tool head that they have on here and noticed that it looks very similar to the Titan Arrow. So I think they're getting ready to implement the Titan Arrow and replace their Wade's Reloaded extruder. So this is their this is the Mini, and then here's their TAS 7 assembly that I was able to download and import. And so and really nothing has changed that I can really tell on the printer itself, other than the mounting plate here is slightly changed because I think they're getting ready to upgrade similarly to this Titan Arrow assembly. So I think they're really working hard to upgrade to this E3D Titan Arrow. Has a really good reputation. I'm excited to see it's out of all of the complaints I have on the Lulzbot printer, the Wade's 3D, it's a great assembly. Lulzbot has one of the better assemblies out there, but it's not easily serviceable compared to something like the Titan Arrow. And at €90 or 90 pounds, and I don't know what that equates to in dollars, what you can find one of these Titan Arrows for in dollars, I'm not sure. I personally haven't bought one, but we can check on Matter Hackers here. E3D Arrow, right? It's called the Arrow. It's 115. So it's about 100, or it's about $90 or $80 cheaper than the Lulzbot entire assembly. So the Wade's Reloaded with their hexagon hot end, so they're V2. So it's a lot less expensive, and it's kind of all inclusive, and it has really, really reputable performance. I think one of the things everybody that is in the Lulzbot community is looking for right now is one of these hardened steel hot ends. So I've got a hardened steel hot end on my TAS 5 right now, so I can print with carbon fiber and not worry about running my nozzle out, you know, reaming it out. So yeah, just found some goodies on the Lulzbot development directory. So you can go in there anytime, and they also had released a beta version of their Cura 2.0, and it's not quite there yet. The profiles, I think they're still tweaking the profiles. There's a lot of differences between Cura 1 and Cura 2, so I think they're still kind of working on. I used it this week to print some prints, and they came out okay. They weren't quite as nice as if I just stick with Cura 1, and especially for the NGen profile. So I think they're still tweaking on all that stuff. But as soon as they have some reliable profiles, I'll keep you in the loop.
Thanks. All right. Well, I'm sorry. I was kind of
distracted.
Being a little mindful.
Oh, good. We all need to be a little mindful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have something in medicine to tell us about.
Yeah, but I wanted to show you I'm in Sansar right now.
Oh, he's in Sansar. Are you interacting with other people in this?
I could be. Somebody actually was in here while you were on.
So this is like a public thing, and whoever's in there is in there.
Yep.
Got it.
So you could interact. Whoops, just fell off. Now, I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, does this work with the controller? You can teleport. So you could teleport to each of these, but since I'm on a keyboard, now remember, I'm just, whoops, huh?
Who doesn't like teleporting?
Yeah, that's kind of fun. But here, see, I can look around. Now, this is just on my laptop, but I could hook up the HTC Vive or the Oculus to this and be able to experience this while being in there. Sit on each one of these little plates here or on a rock. I don't know if there's any audio. Do you hear any audio?
I don't.
So let's make sure where my audio is coming from. It says, yeah, so we should hear any, but I don't hear any. So maybe they didn't put any. But you could add, like I said, Ambiosonic, which is the Ambiosonic X, which is full 360 surround. So you could introduce that in here and actually have 3D audio. That's supported in the developer package. So there could be some in here. I may not have it set up correctly. If they don't, they need to add it. But pretty cool, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this little door, I don't know if you saw the door. There's a door up there. They have doors, and they kind of allow you to go into other areas. It's kind of neat. There was one that was developed by a museum. I remember I showed you early on let's see if I can show you again. You go back to these atlases. There's one for a NASA museum that shows the whole Saturn V. Yeah, the Voyage Live Egypt. We could visit that. So we could actually, so I could see museums and government agencies providing a Sansar place to visit. And I played around with this when it first came out. Kind of cool. It was kind of laggy a little bit, but it seems pretty stable right now. Now, again, I'm not in a VR headset, but so imagine this type of environment with the Google headset capability, and then we're going to talk about a little bit another product later in VR. But I'll let this spin and let me get into, yeah, it's called OCT.
Okay.
And what that stands for is optical coherence tomography. And essentially, if you're familiar with, and we've talked about ultrasound before, actually, I'm going to be distracted right now. Let's jump back. So here we are.
Hi-oh.
Different areas.
We have the All Things 3D bumper playing right now.
You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating,
Designing. There we go.
How did? That's funny. All right. Okay, so go back. All right, so back to the OCD. So essentially, the reason that I wanted to bring this up, and this kind of covers both the 3D in medicine as well as 3D scanning. This optical coherence tomography is the equivalent of ultrasound, which is high frequency acoustics, to light. And what this does is it creates a device that allows a person to have their eyes scanned without having any drops or any chemicals, and provides extremely high resolution cross-sectional images, tomography, of like an optical biopsy that is almost at a cellular level, so that you can see the if there are any problems. And because it has a 2 millimeter penetration capability, if you've got dense tissue or light, what do you want to call it, blocking deterioration, it will show up. So then you'll be able to see macular degeneration. You can look at the photoreceptors themselves, so you could actually see if there are any dead photo. You can look at capillary blood vessels, nerve fibers, all through the eye without any external devices or fluids like drops of that are needed right now, or fluorescent materials that have to be dropped in the eye. And I think my wife had it. It kind of burns your eyes. Imagine being able to do all this by just staring at something, and then it will record it, and then it can be used later on. The other benefit to this is, and I don't know if this article talks about it, I don't think so. I think this other article by this same Health World blog talks about its ability to be used in dermatology. Because it can penetrate 2 millimeters, you can get a full 3D surface at a cellular level. So imagine its usage. Let's say you find a particular area that maybe a tumor, might be cancer. You don't know. And normally the path in the past is that you would do a biopsy and then you'd send it to a lab. My wife has had several biopsies because of her red hair. She's very susceptible to melanoma. In fact, she's had a couple of incidents of melanoma. So it's very critical that she goes regularly to have these biopsies done. But they can be somewhat painful and they leave scars. So imagine being able to, one, use standard camera processes and just a guided eye, and then use this process to look at it at a cellular level, and then before determining if you actually need to do a biopsy. So it provides an extra level of assurance that what you're doing is correct. Because a lot of time biopsies, which is good, come back negative, but that could be a problem. Is it negative or positive? Negative. And because you still have a scar, and sometimes these biopsies are deep in the muscle and they take time to heal. So this could be something more important. Now, what's funny is that the company who, these articles say that these are being used a lot, but it doesn't identify where they're being used a lot. So I reached out to somebody that I know that works in Idaho who does pathology, and seeing if she knows anything about this. So maybe I'll check a little bit later in the show if she writes back to me, or report back next week. So I thought this was kind of cool. If you want to know more about it, Wikipedia has a great article or post on it, optical coherence tomography. And if you're not familiar with it, a lot of the 3D scanning technology in medical use a tomography technique. Essentially, you build up layers of images. And here is an actual cross section. Here they show that you can see what they call corkscrew sweat glands. That's kind of neat in the tissue itself. And so you can learn more. And then here's the theory of essentially like, creating holograms. You have a reference beam and then you split it and then you bounce it off. And then this creates an interference pattern. That interference pattern is utilized to create the three-dimensional information. And here they show all the other aspects that are required for this to work correctly. And then the mathematics even. So you can do time domain as well as frequency domain. Pretty cool. I want to build. So again, lasers, you know, a lot of people talk about computers, but if it weren't for the laser, in my opinion, a lot of this stuff that we do today would not exist. Lasers, I think, don't get the credit that they need. And, you know, lasers are just beeping cool, right?
Lasers are just bleeping cool.
So these will be in the show notes, and I think they're pretty important. Chris, you got another item for us in VR?
I do.
Why don't we get to that, and then I'll get to my item.
So this is another Siggraph, a little Siggraph nugget that we didn't cover last week that I saw that had to do with telehaptics. These guys, it's virtual reality, not with goggles necessarily. Maybe it's in Mike's world of mixed reality, but let's see what Mike says. So these are two boxes with two people interacting here. And there's a physical object on one and a virtual object on another. And the user can tip this ball and it comes out. So let's just replay this one more time because it's a really quick little demo. And so he places that object on there, and then as he bumps it, it goes into the other user's hand. So this is was a Telehaptics. It's called Telehaptics, and there was a paper they came out with at Siggraph. And I got to look up the paper, but they, because I thought it would be in the video here, but it's apparently not. But they were demoing it, and it kind of didn't get a lot of coverage until I saw something this week.
So essentially, a person uses a mirror box with some cameras to provide a virtual presence in the other person's box, and that's been around for a while now. But what's different about this is that the person can put their hand in it, and it can determine that it's touching it, probably through some other sensors, and know that through the contact, it can apply transducers to the other object to cause it to move. So, pretty interesting. So to stay, while you're looking that up, I'm going to go ahead and jump to my next item. So to stay with what we're talking about, which is the mindfulness in VR, here's something I thought was pretty cool. And you'll have to see my show notes later on when I put them in on what I identify this. But these little sensors here, this is a company called Neurable, which actually I think they've been around for a little bit of time, but essentially they've taken the type of sensors that you normally see on EKGs. Is that right? Is it EKGs? That you hook up to your scalp, and they take electrical information from the surface. These are using what they call dry pads, and they're embedded on, as you can see in this probably modified connection to the Vive itself. It's a modified headset helmet. But the important thing is that they're able to take that information and apply it to a game so that you have, in this scenario here, you're a person with telepathic or telekinetic capabilities, and you have to use your mind to control these objects in VR space. How effing cool is that, Chris?
Pretty damn
cool. Able to
cool.
put on a headset. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've always, back when I was a kid, had dreams of where I could actually, let's say not even being a kid, but who hasn't dreamed of be able to lift something with their mind? And now we can actually kind of do that. You put on a VR headset like this one, and you can literally control with your mind where it is in 3D space. Now, obviously in a virtual environment, but to our mind, it probably will kind of screw with us a little bit. So I thought that was kind of neat. Now, why did I bring this up? Not only because here we're actually applying skills, but what is it called? Neurofeedback, is that the term for it? Where essentially you hook up similar type devices and you measure your beta, your alpha, and your theta waves, and either through interactions through a program on the screen or just measurement devices, you can use that to control your levels of emotional state. So you can provide a feedback loop. So imagine this kind of thing being used for that. So you could be in one of these in areas that we've been talking about, where it's a tranquil area, but you might have an orb in front of you and you have to concentrate, and you might be able to shift the color of it. You might actually be able to modify the tonality of the environment around you. You might be able to control the wind. So by focusing, you'd be able to control that. And by interacting in a VR environment, that could allow us to even more concerted visual acuity, because we're isolated to do these things. So I really going to reach out to them and see about what their plans are, when this will be available, and see about getting one of these, because I could really see how this could be very useful in mindfulness, to be able to immediately provide feedback if you're, being focused. And wouldn't it be kind of cool to have a orb and you could change the color of it, change the intensity of it just with your mind, or change the volume or the pitch of audio? I don't know. I think it's all kind of cool. So, here are multiple items on our theme today about being mindful, and a lot how technology, I think, will help in not only isolating us to make it more conducive, without having to spend a lot of money on our physical external environment, but also to be able to be aware of by measurement devices of how mindful we are, and be able to manipulate our VR environment with that focus. Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Chris, you finally have a print whisper. But before we get started, I'm going to jump to my VR screen, and I'm going to give a little bit of a little to keep our audience involved. Look what came in just today, about an hour ago. It's the HP mixed reality headset. So we're going to do a little unboxing. So I hope you can hang around for that. And as you know, last week we talked about the VR backpack.
Yeah.
I've made progress, but have to say it's not as easy as it looks, and maybe spending $1,800 might be worth it, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it does work. At least it works with the mixed reality developer set. So we're actually going to plug in the mixed reality headset into this and see how it works. So we're going to talk about that too. Hopefully you'll be able to stay with us. If not, you can come back later on and watch it, Chris. But on that note, let's go back to the print whisper.
Okay. Okay. So today I want to talk about learn more again. I touch on this quite a bit, whether it's reading or just reinvesting in yourself. And I want to ask a question of anybody, and I'm not perfect, so this question goes out to anybody: is your nighttime hobby elevating you, or is it dragging you down? So what are you doing at night? Is it bringing you up, or is it bringing you down? So everybody deserves a little bit of time to unwind. I get that. I deserve time to unwind and watch my Netflix or read a book or whatever I like to do. But a lot of times I find myself watching 5 hours of Netflix or something. I mean, is that productive? Is that a good use of your time? And if you're doing that, don't beat yourself up.
You need my wife. She says we only have at most 2 hours, period.
Yeah. So, but if you're spending a lot of time on the tube, don't beat yourself up. Just be honest with yourself and mindful, like we're talking about today in our podcast, is be mindful of that time and acknowledge that you could be spending that time a little better. And I want to give you a couple resources to help you elevate yourself. And these can be done anytime that you have free time, not just after work, not just when you're unwinding. And there's some quick ones that I've been using quite a bit of lately. And so the first one, obviously, I got to plug Onshape. I always am plugging Onshape. Everybody plugging Onshape. But basically, what it comes down to is Onshape is next generation CAD software. It's a next generation CAD product. It's from the original creators of SolidWorks. It's backed by infinite computing. It's extremely user friendly. If you've ever used CAD, any kind of CAD, 3D CAD, 2D CAD, highly recommend you go through the tutorials at learn.onshape.com. I did it this week. I went through all of the tutorials that they had available. I'm even signed up for an instructor-led training later on. Let's see, it's actually next month. And so I'm actually going to be doing instructor-led training. Onshape sponsored me. Thank you, Onshape.
Wow.
And this learn.onshape.com, but there's free quick start and fundamentals and data management pathways that you can do, and you can actually get a certificate that you can print and put up on your wall and tell people, hey, I'm in Onshape. I have some sort of Onshape credential now. Not like really anybody cares, but it only took me a few hours to blow through these tutorials. So if you're familiar with CAD, you can learn a lot. You can learn about Onshape, how it works, and see why it's really a game changer. How it's gonna change things here in the near future. So that's one resource. Really love the learn. And I'm not only is Onshape just a great package to work in, but I really think that the learning side of things and the video tutorials and all of the exercises they've put together, they've really put together like basically a SolidWorks killing machine. So my next user, or my next place that I like to go is one that I've been using lately, and I've been sharing it with my friends even, is Math BFF on YouTube. She's got a channel on YouTube. This gal is cuter than a button. So I've always really had a hard time with math, especially calculus. I mean, I'm proficient, but I've had a hard time in a classroom setting, and I mostly think it's because my attention drifts during during class, sometimes during the podcast. Sorry, Mike. And next thing I know, I'm missing an important.
I watch you.
And the next thing I know is I'm missing an important fundamental concept that the rest of the course is built on, and I'm lost, and I'm never able to move on beyond that concept. And that's why I like YouTube. So Nancy, who runs Math BFF, is really, really talented in her instruction method and in her, like how she explains concepts, and she just runs over them and really makes it easy. But she's captivates your attention also with her. She's got an extremely lovable personality, and they always say find a teacher that matches your learning style. Well, this is an absolute formula for success. I really wish there was more channels like hers, where whether it's a female.
Did you just have a Freudian slip? Just
no, yeah, no. But if you're interested in trig or calculus or some more advanced math concepts, but you've always kind of like had a hard time learning them, like me, or maybe you got lost in your calculus course, go check out her YouTube channel, Math BFF. So she'll be in the show notes as well.
What does the BFF mean?
I don't know. Best friends forever, I guess. And then our last guy, obviously we've plugged him before, but Tom's Guide, one of the most popular 3D printing YouTube channels out there. And if you want to know where the Print Whisperer learns a lot of his tips, well, Tom has definitely taught me a thing or two about 3D printing. And you can go over, it's Thomas Sandlatterer. And he is, I don't know if he's Norwegian, where he's from, but he's from over in Europe somewhere, but he is like, he might be German. He's just like dead on, like knows engineering stuff, and he tests all these materials, and he tests. They send him all the machines. He puts them through their paces, and he gives a rating for them. And he has live builds that he does, and he just, I mean, the guy he's a posting animal. He puts videos on every couple days. He'll have really good videos that he puts on. And here's his, he just is running down all the materials right now. Every year round, he has this thing called Halloween, which is like built up to Halloween, where he tests out all the latest, greatest materials, and he gives them a rating on how easy they are to print with and how stable they are, how strong they are. And so he's got some really good little nuggets of information. And it's just always good. There's only so many hours in a day for us to do what we do. And, you know, when you have people all the way across the world working on similar projects, it's always nice to see that they share. So that's why we try to share information, and you should try to share information too. And, but definitely take those nighttime hobbies and move them into something productive. If you feel like you aren't quite being super productive lately, you know, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up, but go and learn something new. And hopefully these resources can help you.
Pretty cool. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I think it's great. Your second item there, I'll have to check it out. Oh, well, so let's kind of move on a little bit. What do we got? Oh, I guess we're in the tech closet, aren't we?
We're going to the tech closet.
We are in the tech closet. So I'll stay with my big screen because, well, I got it hooked up right now. So first, let's talk about that VR backpack that we started working on. Well, I now regret doing that. And the reason for it is that, as they say, engineering can be hard, especially when you want to use off-the-shelf components. So what I have found is that, one, I tried to use a mini ITX board with standard components. I went with not the KB Lake, the one prior to that, the 6500 series. But I went with an i3 because there's only 35 watts. So obviously with a backpack where you have to have a battery attached to it, I wanted to keep this thing at the lowest power amount of wattage possible. One of the reasons that I wanted to do that is obviously to wear it on my back. Now, if you notice some of the units that we covered last week, they literally take up your entire back. And the reason for that is they have these big, hefty lithium-ion batteries, a couple of them, plus they have some pretty beefy standard desktop-type components in them. So there's part of the problem. You have to create a large container. So I wanted to create a smaller, but more importantly, those units were anywhere from $2,200 to $1,900 in price. I wanted to create a system that was less than $1,000. Well, getting some feedback from you, Chris.
You might be hearing the train.
Oh, well, that would be feedback. So one of the things that I did is that the case that I have, if you saw it earlier, how funny. But the case that I have, I wanted it to be the smallest possible. But what I have found is that even though there are cases out there that can be used for mini ITX, they're normally very large to house, you know, like a GPU or other types of component. But what I did, and I did this on a previous unit, is I put the actual GPU on the outside with an extender cable. And like I said, I've got it powered up right now and I can't move my camera. But just say that it doesn't look very pretty. I would have to create a new housing for. But I was also trying to find a case that, since this is a half height 1050 card, looking for a half height. So it essentially extends it out maybe 2 inches, which is more than adequate to be able to still put on your back. And frankly, there aren't any cases. There's one out of the Ukraine, which would cost a lot to have it shipped. And then there's another one out of China, which is the one I'll probably go with. But in both of those cases, they're only for a single width card. And all these GPUs are double width because they have a larger heatsink and a power supply. So I'll be able to cut it out. But all of these have to be modified in order for that. So that's the first hurdle, is to find a case that can support something that you can put on your back. The next thing is finding a power supply powerful enough to be able to run this with a GPU. And one of the things that I was beating my head on is that I've got these little devices. Where are they at? That are kind of cool. They're called Pico XT, and they plug into the ATX connector on your motherboard. Now, a lot of these mini ITX boards have 24 pins, so you got to make sure that is what you're looking for. So this is what I got. So it plugs in. This is 160 watt. Now that can be somewhat of a misnomer because that's all the voltage rails, and you'll find out that can be a problem. And these aren't really rated for actually running an NVIDIA card on them. So I wanted to see if it would work. So the first thing is, if you got 160 watts, what did I figure out? You need something like 12 to 14 amps of 12 volts to run this. All I have is a 10 amp. So I bought another and I didn't come in. And what I found is that even though I could run, and we'll see if it'll still work, the mixed reality demo or the developer portion without a headset, it wouldn't run the HTC Vive. It literally shut down because I didn't have, I'm assuming the 12 volts I was supplying wasn't enough. So then I pulled a standard ATX power supply, plugged it in, and was able to get the HTC Vive up and running on it, but I'll get back to in a moment. The other thing is this is set for 12 volts only. The power packs I'm using are these video power packs. This one here is an Anton Bauer, but you can buy these Sony V-Lock batteries for about $120 that provide about 160 was it 100? Yeah. 1.6 amperes per hour or 160 milliamperes per hour. Is that right? No, I can't even remember. Which, no, 160 watts per hour. So it would have the adequate power, but they're rated at 14.8 volts, if I remember correctly. What does it say? And the problem is these power supplies that fit on your board are made specifically for working in your car. So if you wanted to set this up like a small computer in your car, remember in those old days where you hooked a small computer up and played all your MP3s through that computer? I don't know, maybe you didn't, Chris, but I did. But that's what these are made for. So they provide 12 volts only, and they have a very narrow range. So the funny thing is when I first started working with this, it wouldn't power on. I thought, oh crap, something's wrong with the board. So I finally realized that this thing needed 12 volts. Maybe plus or minus 1 volts. The 14.5 volt or 8 point didn't work with this. So that was one problem. So now that I know that it runs with 12 volts, like I said, I had a 12 volt power supply that I used to create a heating element for a 3D printer. So I was able to use that, but it was only 10 amps. It ran the computer perfectly for anything except excessive graphics, like the HTC Vive, and it would power down. And that's why I said I had to use a standard power supply to test that out. The good thing is with an i3 and the 1050, you can run an HTC Vive, but you need to make sure that your 1050 is overclocked, and even some of the demos still provide some lag and are underperforming. So to get an i3 and a 1050 to save money, I don't suggest. In fact, they don't rate the 1050. However, if you change out the i3 with an i5 and stick with the 1050 overclock, it seems to run smoothly, which is what I found out on my other unit. So you might keep that in mind. They may make, the 1060 about $100 more. So again, I wanted to create a unit for about $500. I've kind of accomplished that. It works, but obviously spending a few more hundred would actually be in your best interest. But it's compact, as I showed earlier to Chris. It does fit on my back, and I can walk around with it. But I still need to replace the power supply in it to able to handle the 14 volt. I tried to find another Pico XT type or ATX type power supply. I found this one, but it only has a 20 pin connector. So it immediately will not work. So I'll have to send it back. In fact, they said it was an ATX. Obviously, it's not a full ATX. So I won't be able to use this. The cool thing about this one is that it supports a voltage range from like 10 volts to 25 volts. So it works well within this, but the problem is it won't work on this mini ITX board that I have. And also it's only 120 watts, which I think will be barely enough. And the other thing to keep in mind is since these are contained in these cases, once they start raising in temperature, it decreases the performance of them. So 120 may only be 100 watts. So I've gone with a board that will be coming in a week that's longer. It does a couple of things. One, it has an automatic power shutdown. So if you lose battery power, you don't immediately shut off your computer. So that's a cool factor. It'll send a signal to your computer to shut down before a soft shutdown before the actual battery depletes. So that's one positive. The other is the rails are beefier. The thing to keep in mind, even then with this 160, that's total wattage. And the actual 12-volt rail, because I've got this GPU card on it, is running higher than what you would normally have. And that's, I think, part of the problem why this doesn't work. I will be able to test that a little bit later with a beefier 12-volt power supply, but I think that'll be part of the problem as well. So currently I have one of these inside the unit. I'm running it off a 10 amp 12-volt circuit, and this is the screen. And right now it's all set up for a mixed reality headset. But guess what came in today, Chris?
Your HP mixed reality headset.
Right. So we're going
I'm never gonna see you again, am I?
Yeah, I wouldn't get up. So this is the box it came in.
This is Mike's new life.
Huh?
This is Mike's new life. This is where you're gonna leave humankind now, go into mixed reality, and
never come back. All right, so essentially, people complain that it's like bare minimum in the box. I don't care. I think all the other stuff. So this is it.
That's brand new.
Yeah, kind of
never seen it.
Never seen it. Brand new. These are the developer models, and some people complaining that they're not that comfortable. But right now, I kind of like.
Why don't you cry about it then?
Huh?
Why don't you cry about it?
Why would I cry?
I'm saying these people that are complaining.
Yeah.
Complainers gonna complain, man.
Well, the other thing is, and hopefully mine won't have a problem. All right, so I'm pulling off. The way supposedly this works is instead of having a 3D sensor like the occipital, it has two cameras and it uses parallax to determine your 6 degrees of freedom. And there's a great article on Medium. A lot of people have been already talking about it that explains what all that means and how this can be done. And it's something that obviously Microsoft has been pioneering. So I will take off the little items in the front for the optics. The sad thing is that they look like standard Fresnel lenses, which means that's a disappointment. But here's your cable. It's removable. The other cool factor on the HP versus the Acer is one, I like that it's gray, but it has this ratchet thing, which I'm using in my own headset, that allows you to put it on your head and then tighten it down. And it's very light. Can you see me, Chris?
Yeah.
Hello. And doesn't it kind of remind you of like maybe the Niobe IO Play?
It kind of reminds me of LeVar on Star Trek.
It does, doesn't it? That's what
It looks cool.
Now, the other thing that's kind of neat is it's hinged, so you can actually lift it up. Hello. Like so.
Oh, yeah.
So, and it actually, I don't know about these little flaps here. So the lenses are very similar to what I'm using, except they do look like Fresnels. It has a cable here, it might be a proprietary, that allows you to unplug. And then let's look in the box. So here's the actual cable. It's somewhat long. And from what I've read earlier, so I'll just jump to it. I'll just put that. It has an HDMI, and I'm assuming it's HDMI 1.4, maybe even 2. That's required, which this 1050 card supports. And has that proprietary cable, which I'll plug in. It almost looks like I can't think of it now. A dual port type cable, or maybe that's not the word I'm using. And then on the other end, looks like it's about 6 to 8 feet, which obviously if you're going to put this on your back, it needs to be bundled properly. So it has an HDMI and a USB 3. All right, so let's jump back to my screen with the computer, and we're going to plug this in. So if it works, the computer should stay alive. If the power supply we talked about a little earlier doesn't work, then it's going to die. And then that's all we'll be able to test today. So let's try it. Okay. So I have it plugged in. It didn't die, but I don't see anything. Oh, it's broken already. So let's jump out of this and reactivate it. It says connect. Check your USB cable. What does it say? I can't read it.
Make sure it's USB 3.
Well, it's supposed to be, and it's telling me it's not. Nope, it wasn't. Okay, so now it is. Check your display cable. So, right, is that what it says? Nothing?
Mm-hmm. Maybe next week you could clue us in after you get the thing working.
No, let's see.
Oh, no signal.
That's fine.
Not quite plug and play yet. I guess that's why they call it the dev version. Oh, some sort of.
Well, I didn't bring it back here with me. So essentially, what I think has happened is, for whatever reason, the second HDMI port is not showing up. But let's do this. Let's go ahead and completely log out. Let's close. Let's go over here. Shut down. And then recycle, and maybe that will do it. Come on. Shut down. I did say shut down, right?
I don't know, but I got to roll, so I will probably see this next week.
Okay, well, you roll, and I'll tinker with this a little bit, another 5 minutes if I get it up and running. If not, like you said, I will report back next week. So again, I'll jump back. So some people thought it was too plastically. That's fine with me. They say that it's not have enough support. I don't have an issue with that as well. I mean, you could obviously change out the pad here with something a little bit better. But again, it's a developer's set. What else on this thing is kind of cool? It has a built-in earphone jack so that you can run headphones with it. And supposedly it has 14 by 40 by 1440, which I think is actually better. But instead of being OLED, it is LCD. And so that means I don't think it says 90 frames per second. So I'll have to give you a report back on how it looks. But some people say it's okay. The sad thing is because it is a developer, there isn't a lot of applications out there. The Windows environment, which we had up running. Okay, so it did come. All right, so I'm going to launch it again while I'm talking. There is no apps for it yet. And whatever's available is only within that little studio that they have. So there's no games, nothing like that for it. Many people felt that the tracking is pretty cool because it essentially doesn't need light towers or things like that. Okay. All right, so it did launch. Okay. All right, so it says it's ready. So let's see. So I don't know what ready means. Oops, didn't it just drop out again? Well, it says it's ready, but I don't see anything on my screen. Hopefully I don't have a bad unit. It said a couple of people had bad unit. And it keeps wanting to drop up. Now, close it and bring it back up again. Shut down. Oh, Chris has left us. Let's try it one more time. Well, it appears it is not working. So again, this could be because of the computer I hooked it up to. I will revisit it later. I will use it on another device that I have that is already ready to run it, and we'll see how it works out. So the actual headset itself seems pretty comfortable to me. It has this style brace, seems very similar to the HoloLens itself. It's lightweight. The lenses seem comfortable. I don't know if there's actually any fine tuning on the lens. It doesn't appear to be, nor can you modify the IPD. They say it's done digitally. I'd like to know how that's done. So the thing to try out is the tracking capability, and this is one of the reasons I built the backpack to see if I would be able to move around in it. But having power supply issues with that already, and so next week we should have a better assessment. So I was hoping that I would have this all up and running. Sadly, I do not. So I think I'll end the show on that. So pretty cool. And either I'll do another video later this week when I have it up and running, or I'll just wait till next Friday. But yeah, I think it's a really, really cool little unit. Sadly, it reminds me a lot of the Neo DI Play as far as its design and appearance. So, oh well, on that note, I will let you go. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week on 3D in Review. Bye.